The use of e-cigarettes is associated with an increased risk of heart attack, heart disease, and stroke.
In this episode, we explore a bit further into the global web of anti-vape lies.
In terms of heart and lung disease, it's looking about as bad as smoking.
The truth is, it's not helping you to quit.
We know that at the center are billionaire philanthropists who are using their money to influence the World Health Organization, and in turn, governments who rely on their guidance regarding tobacco control policy. But there is another branch to the web, a strategy to corrupt the public and academic narratives who allow themselves to be used to promote the idea that all things tobacco harm reduction are bad and must be discredited.
The U.S. Surgeon General is declaring youth vaping an epidemic.
And this is why now there is a major push for new research.
There's no reason to run a risk that can damage your health for the rest of your life until the science is complete.
As we look deeper into this, we see that the same people are funding academic institutions for their research and then assisting in this research to be broadcast in mainstream media to control the public perception and promote anti-tobacco harm reduction lies.
The truth is, it's not helping you to quit.
This now includes publicly defaming consumer advocates. Earlier this year, the British Medical Journal published an article by Glantz and Petanovich that questioned the integrity of grassroots consumer advocates by inferring that they were nothing more than paid tobacco company lobbyists being used to influence government tobacco control policy to favor big tobacco interests. We spoke with one of the advocates who were attacked, Asa Saligupta from ECST Thailand, via telephone. Asa, why do you believe that you were a target as a consumer advocate in the BMJ article?
Well, actually, my name was mentioned, so it just not be believed. The article said something like tobacco control victory over tobacco industry. Mm-hmm. But instead of speaking about tobacco industry, that article mentioned my name, mentioned ECST, and somehow it implied we work with big tobacco, namely Philip Morris, and with a short paragraph saying there's no evidence linking us to Philip Morris whatsoever. The whole text seems to imply that we are somehow a part of, even, a branch of Philip Morris, which we are not. We are consumers.
What was your reaction to this attack?
Shocked. I should say not really shocked. I was shocked that, they have a guts to do this. But in a sense, the two co-authors, we have known for quite some time that they always come up with some misinformation and outright lies.
Have you received an apology, and was a correction made to the article?
Correction, yes. Apology, no. Because it also not mentioned not only ECST, but also mentioned other organizations as well, and quite a few, actually. There are some minor changes, yes. They said that they took down the part that mentioned our link to Philip Morris, and also they said they will apologize, but I haven't seen any apology or anything.
Now, you may ask, what is the big deal? One researcher who was similarly attacked in the same journal for his research on COVID-19 that had nothing to do with tobacco harm reduction was Dr. Konstantinos Farsalinos. When Dr. Farsalinos wrote to the BMJ and other journals that had published the article to ask for a retraction, he was met with crickets. Then he did his own research into who wrote the article and why they would falsely accuse him of a conflict of interest he does not have. Again, an issue of a presumption that could have been easily verified by the authors, who chose not to do that. What he found out was that the authors of the article who accused him failed to present their own conflict of interest, specifically their funding from the University of Bath and from the Bloomberg Foundation through the University of Bath. What is most concerning about universities and researchers making ad hominem attacks on consumer advocates and researchers' authenticity and integrity is that A, they are based on presumptions and not facts, and B, advocates under normal circumstances would not even be aware of the attacks and therefore would not have an avenue for response. Let's get some guidance from Jerry Stimson, Director of Knowledge Action Change in the United Kingdom, about the attacks on consumers, advocates, and all things tobacco harm reduction in a scientific medical journal. Why do you believe that some advocates are being attacked in scientific journals?
I think this is a pathetic last-ditch attempt to try to delay or defer tobacco harm reduction. They've lost the arguments. There's not the science to support their arguments. So all they can now do is to resort to ad hominem attacks, whether it's on consumer groups, scientists, or advocates. And of course, it's well funded, and there's going to be a lot more of it to come. It's well funded by Bloomberg, and it's well funded at the University of Bath and some other organizations. So there's going to be more along the way.
What is your advice to consumer advocates who find themselves being attacked in the media and in scientific journals?
Okay, first, it's outrageous that individuals can be named in a scientific paper in tobacco control or BMJ. Seems to be totally out of order that you can pick on ordinary citizens, and talk about their work as though they are research subjects and they don't have any say in being involved in that. I think there's lots of ways you can try to knock back. There may be legal challenge, and sooner or later somebody in tobacco control is going to go that one step too far that somebody can sue them. But in the meantime, I think don't moan, complain. And that's my new tack this year. Whenever you see something that's wrong, whether it's a researcher who's using deception to gain information about vapors, whether it's people who are looking at accusing ECST of being in league with PMI, then you complain to journals, you complain to ethics committees, you complain to universities. A lot of this stuff is on the margin of what's legitimate in science. So I think you have to make a noise and make life difficult for the people who are making life difficult for you.
So where does this leave us? We know that those who should be held to a higher professional standard can be bought and sold. We know that we should have the right to respond when we are being attacked in the media and scientific journals. Stay tuned as we discuss in the live panel that follows a strategy and approach in order to deal with these attacks in the media and scientific journals. But first, don't forget to sign and share the Right to Switch petition. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're here. I will bring in the panelists one by one. I'm going to start with Dr. Konstantinos Farsalinos. Hello, Dr. Farsalinos.
Hello,
thank you
hello,
for joining
everyone.
us.
Hi, thank you. It was interesting that Jerry was basically talking about me, not only me, but that was the latest story that he was commenting on, yeah?
I'm going to add Jena in now. I'm going to add the rest of the panelists. Hi, Jena. Welcome. Jena, you know Konstantinos. Konstantinos, I think you know Jena.
Of course.
All right. We're going to add in Asa. Asa, you need to unmute yourself. Asa is currently driving out of Bangkok to go home before the lockdown.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Asa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm not. My son is driving, so yeah, okay, I can talk.
I have a nice story to tell you.
Wait, let me have the last panelist.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And this is Mirza Abeer. Mirza, you need to unmute yourself, please.
Done.
Mirza, meet Dr. Farsalinos. Dr. Farsalinos, meet Mirza. Mirza is the consumer advocate for Pakistan.
I've never met him. He's probably the first consumer that I haven't met. Active consumer activist that I haven't met. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's new. He just joined CAFRA.
Great.
Okay, only thing I'm going to ask everybody is if you aren't speaking, please mute yourselves so we don't have any interference. Konstantinos, why don't you start and tell us what you were saying you were going to tell us when you first came on.
A few days ago, on July 1st, a U.S. pharma company announced the first results of use of a nicotinic cholinergic agonist in SARS-CoV-2. They did experiments in vitro in human cells and in monkeys. And they found that a nasal spray of varenicline, which has the same properties as nicotine, it is a selective alpha-7 nicotinic cholinergic receptor agonist, substantially reduces within a few days the viral load of SARS-CoV-2. And they are moving to clinical trials. In their preprint, they were citing 4 of my studies, which were about the nicotinic cholinergic system, nicotine, and so on. So we have the first in vitro and in vivo proof that our theory probably works. Our scientific hypothesis probably works. So I'll be a bit patient, waiting for clinical data. But if there are any clinical data, BMJ will be embarrassed. Yeah, because I don't know if you've seen my response in Chaos. Let me tell you that I was never allowed to respond to the letter in the BMJ. And so I've made more than 10 attempts. Yeah, I even sent besides, submitting it online, because they have a rapid response online system, and it was always rejected. So I sent a response to the editor herself. The editor sent it to a lawyer, and the lawyer completely manipulated and changed my response. And they came back with a modified text that they wanted to upload under my name, with me featured as an author. So you understand that this is, I don't know what the hell they were thinking, but someone else wrote or modified. Okay, let's say modified, because it was a modification of my response. So someone else basically prepared the response, and they wanted to upload it under my name. So, for example, they removed the reference that I'm not paid by the University of Patras. But that's the main argument, that I have no conflict with the university. And you know what? The funny thing is that this is something that can be independently verified. If you look at the website of the University of Patras, you will not find my name anywhere.
Yeah,
because I'm not paid staff.
Well, that's why I have Jena here, because I wanted to ask Jena something. And this, now that you've said that, I want to.
Not only that, listen. If you want to know if someone is paid by a university, you just send an official letter in a mail, and you ask if this person is a member of a paid staff, whether he or she is paid by salary, by some kind of grants or whatever. It is something that, whatever I would say, they could independently verify that. And they knew this since November 2020. So they had months to verify this.
Yeah, this is what my question.
By the way, sorry. Come on, it's a lot of information. By the way, the BMJ is a media partner of the investigative desk. So there is another conflict of interest that they did not declare in the paper, in the featured article, and it's on their website. On the website of the investigative desk lists the BMJ as their media partner. So this is another conflict which explains, as you understand, why they are protecting them, why they are protecting their financial conflict with Bloomberg, yeah, and of course why they are protecting all the nonsense that they say. Basically, they not only ignore the research, which perfectly verifies us, but they also refer to the Open Safely study by presenting the wrong results. Because the Open Safely study found that smoking is associated with 11% less risk of dying from COVID. But what they did was that they used the model which adjusted only for age and gender, while, you know, when you have a large list of variables, you know, that's a preliminary model only. You have to use all adjustments in order to get some credible results. And when the model was adjusted with, when all the variables were included, the results were perfectly in line with us. Basically, they were, you know, far beyond our results, because we never found in any study that smoking reduces the risk of dying from COVID. We only found that very few smokers end up in hospital. So that's very different, you know. In fact, we found that when you end up in hospital, probably these are the smokers who are most sensitive. Probably they have other kinds of diseases. But when you end up in hospital, then it means that you're in trouble as a smoker. And of course, we never delivered the message that it's smoking that matters. We were always talking about nicotine or other cholinergic agonists. Varenicline was one of our proposals, together with nicotine, with choline, with apatabidine, some other nicotine cholinergic agonists, in a paper that we wrote in August 2020. And again, varenicline was examined together with nicotine and 3 other cholinergic agonists in an in silico study, so a study using molecular 3D modeling of the molecules of the compounds and the SARS-CoV-2 molecule, basically the spike protein. And varenicline was examined in another paper that we published in December 2020. So they pretended they didn't understand that, you know, it's not about smoking. It's not even about tobacco harm reduction, let me tell you. They tried to link 2 different things, of course, because nicotine is the common denominator, yes, in these 2, in THR and in our COVID research. So they tried to link them as if there is some kind of a conspiracy theory of promoting either cigarettes or I don't know, e-cigarettes, heated tobacco products through our study. Well, we have patented the use of nicotinic cholinergic agonists for COVID, and it has nothing to do with THR. We only mention medical use of medical products.
Yeah, and this is why I wanted to ask Jena. Con, let me ask Jena a question, because Jena's been in medical publishing for a long time. She's now in public relations. I mean, she started as a child, obviously. Jena, my question to you is this. Okay, you're going to have to unmute yourself to answer it. As a publisher of a medical journal, and now in doing the work that you do, how do you view what is going on in scientific journals? Because the rest of us, the consumers, and I guess the public as well, we look at these journals as being, you know, founts of information and facts and science. And obviously from what Con has gone through, and obviously what Asa has gone through, it seems that there's some sort of corruption going on of the actual science. And how do you view that? And also, how do you view we should react to it?
Okay, thanks, Nancy. As a public relations expert and former publisher of Medical Observer, I think the attacks on THR experts and advocates are below the belt. And instead of confronting the issue, the attackers are shooting the messenger, which speaks ill of their strategy. In recent months, the attacks on us have been derogatory, and sometimes it borders defamation and libel, which is a crime in most countries. But the question that we have is, what do we do and how do we confront it? Number one lesson when we are in this situation is that you're not supposed to be silent, hoping that it will go away. That's number one. Number two, the second lesson is to be direct, straightforward, and simple in our response so that people will understand the issue no matter how complex it would be. Third lesson is to learn to distinguish news from opinion. Not all articles that come out in newspapers or news portals are news. Some are opinions, and people have the right to his or her own opinion. But that's not the case with news. News have to be accurate. And if a newspaper is publishing inaccurate information, readers have the right to call the attention of the editor and the publisher. So they can write an article with their side of the story. And if that news portal or news article values objectivity and fairness, then they would include our side of the story. Number four, clarify, deny, and rectify. Even if the attackers choose to focus on hitting below the belt, we should remain calm and we should present facts to inform and not to insult. In the face of negative news, fake news, or derogatory statements, we should be patient enough to clarify the issue by giving our side of the story and deny inaccurate information and rectify the errors by pointing out what is true. Number five is to respond quickly. If something comes out in the news and it's not accurate, you're not supposed to give your side of the story or rectify it tomorrow or 2 days from the time it came out. Preferably and ideally, you're supposed to correct it on the same day. So we have to be ready to tackle fake news head on. Number six, I'll try to make this quick. Six is present better stories. When we say a better story, you're supposed to give something that's relevant, timely, accurate, interesting. And these are the elements of news. So to make an interesting story to readers, we must combine scientific evidence with the experiences of smokers, vapers, and nicotine users. And then finally, last one, I want to emphasize that opinions could change. And it may not change as fast as we would want them to be, but they do change. Many years ago, it took many years for people to stop believing that the earth is flat. 20 years ago, we thought that climate change was a hoax. 10 years ago, we thought that self-driving cars are fiction. And 2 years ago, no one thought that working from home is feasible. That's all change. And this change should start from consumers, not from righteous self-non-smokers.
Well,
It's
here's
time
the
to
thing.
change the narrative. Yeah.
Here's a question, though. I mean, a lot of the things that are in the newspapers, and Konstantinos, this might be you as well. A lot of things that these newspapers are picking up, they're coming from these scientific journals and these so-called experts. So how do consumers and the public, how are they able to reliably assess the value and trust what they're reading in the newspaper if the scientific journals are having issues with getting the facts?
Let me now intervene in what Jena said, because these are exactly the problems that I have been facing. All the things that Jena correctly mentioned that you should do, it's exactly what I was facing. For example, I wanted and I submitted my response to the BMJ for the first time on the day the article was published. And that was my main concern. I have more than 15 email exchanges with the editors. and my main concern was the speed of response. That's exactly what Jena said. And I was seeing, it was more than obvious that they were trying to delay my response, because my response was ready since January 2021, because that was the third attempt. Let me remind you that that the same journalist wrote an article in Le Monde in January, and in a Dutch medium in again in January. I mean, it was just a few days apart. So I had everything basically prepared, because I had sent 3 letters to Le Monde, 2 letters to the Dutch media. No one ever responded. So everything was ready. So one of their tricks was to delay my response and eventually to deny my right to respond. And my response was not just theories and nonsense. My response provided official documentation provided through a Freedom of Information request that journalists had a conflict of interest. They were paid by Bloomberg. It doesn't matter if they were paid for this article or not. There is no proof what they were paid for, but they had been paid. They didn't declare that. It was just a few days ago that I noticed that the BMJ is a media partner of the investigative desk, so it's not even mentioned in my response, which was published in Chaos. So, speed, story, they didn't like the story. They wanted, in my response, they wanted me to remove the reference to the Freedom of Information documents, while I sent them all the documents in a separate email. I had all the documents online. I was not referencing to fantasy documents. The documents were released online because they were obtained through a Freedom of Information request from a university, not from an unknown source. So, they didn't want any of the arguments that, destroy their story. They didn't want it to be online. That's the main point. So it's censorship. First of all, it's defamation with lies, and then it's censorship towards your right to respond.
Now, my question but Con, here's the question, okay? I mean, is this it seems to me, and maybe I'm out of the loop for too long, but it seems to me that this the attacks like on you and the attack on Asa, this is like a new method that they're using to try to prevent the facts from getting out. I mean, do you have any idea why that is? I mean, it's an
escalation. There is no doubt. It's definitely an escalation. Now they're using, the media. No one cares about the media. The stories in the media, you just forget it, and that's fine. But it's an escalation because this rubbish is now in the scientific domain, believe it or not. And that's why I was trying to have my story in a scientific domain, and that's why they didn't want me to have the story in the scientific domain. Well, unlucky, they were unlucky because Chaos, which has my response, is also in the scientific domain. It has a DOI number, so it can be cited, it can be used as a reference. And it's far more, it contains far more details than the censorship that BMJ wanted to enforce. And I think that's the only way you can do it. That's the only way.
Now, as Jerry said, he sees, and I'm guessing that you probably see the same thing, you can confirm or deny. He sees that this is just going to get worse, and it's going to be more and more of this. Definitely. I mean, Asa, I would like to ask Asa a question because Asa was attacked in the BMJ as well. Asa, when you were attacked and you went through the process that you had to go through, has that impacted your advocacy in any way, either negative or positive, because of what you went through?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Nancy, and hi to everyone. Just greetings out. Sorry, I can't turn my camera on because it's so shaky, jumpy. I'm on the road. But to respond to that question, definitely it had, and there's a lot of antis, our opposites, the oppositions had been using that somewhat. I don't think they use it much since we started to respond back. Of course, us from ECST, from End Cigarette Smoke Thailand, and also from KAC, and also from INCO, that were mentioned in that researchers, quote unquote. I don't really want to call it research or anything, and we were quite surprised that something like that could be in what you call a very respective medical journal. It's something like they printed out like it had been scientifically proven, and in the end, they just have like a line or two saying that, well, after all that been said and done, there can be the evidence has not been found linking between us and Philip Morris. So I said, like, so what is everything's going on? So I don't know, positive, I don't think so, and negative, somewhat, not a lot, but surprise, yes. We were shocked.
Yeah, I can imagine. Mirza, you're listening to all of this. You're a relatively new advocate. What is your take on the fact that, the experts or the journals can do these kinds of attacks? And obviously, as you know, then the media picks up on it, as Jena explained, and you have the outlet via the media to complain. But how do you view this as a relatively new advocate? What is your take on all of this?
Well, first of all, hi everyone. I basically think it was something we should have expected. It was something I expected as a natural progression. I remember when I started vaping, there used to be attacks on the science behind vaping. And in our country, Dr. Farsalinos is very well known amongst the vaping community because whenever there was an attack, his articles and his rebuttal was always quoted to allay the fears of all us vapors here. When the science stopped being attacked, it was only natural that they started attacking the advocates and the consumers. By profession, I'm a lawyer, and I've seen this. I've seen this in courts when you're fighting a particularly difficult case and you make good points. Sometimes the opposition resorts to personal attacks, something which never flies. And same here, we might get a few people that that pick up on it, try to use it, but even they know, and the public at large will, to an extent, know that this is all just smokes and mirrors. This will not fly. Plus, I honestly think we should be more when it happens. I'm pretty sure it'll happen to me someday as well. I don't plan on sitting by. I will go on the attack. There's so much you can do. Like Jenna said, the response comes first, like Dr. Farsalinos also did. The response should be fact-based, not personal. You break holes in their arguments, you break holes in their story, and then you force them to apologize. Make them see you're not a soft target, because they'll keep doing this otherwise. They need to know why. I'm sure everyone remembers when vaping came out, it was tobacco that attacked vaping. Tobacco's backed off because the consumer advocates and the vapors in general did not let that sit by. They were always harsh in their rebuttal. What we are facing right now is a new wave. Is a new wave, and I honestly think that it's to be expected, and we should be on our guards.
Okay, I agree. I've got a question, and I'm not sure which one of you wants to pick it up. I'm going to read the question. Given that the evidence suggests that at least some conventional media have been compromised by the anti-tobacco harm reduction messaging they publish and are being funded by anti-tobacco harm reduction billionaires, what strategies can consumers use to ensure that their voices and experiences are heard and that their outrage at the blatant and untruthful interference in scientific health and THR consumer affairs. So I'm not sure who wants to pick this up. Jena?
Nancy, first of all, I want to comment something on something that Mirza said. It was perfectly unexpected that the scientific domain, so scientific journals, would be used by journalists with no scientific background for nonsense, for science mispresentation, misinterpretation, and for an attempt to use such kind of confusion, intentionally creating confusion in order to mispresent science and and use arguments like conflicts coming from their fantasies. No, you don't expect a scientific journal to participate to this game. It was perfectly unexpected. I was expecting, of course, an escalation in the media. And when you turn a scientific journal into a yellow type of newspaper, a junk newspaper, and you don't give the opportunity to respond, this is unprecedented, then something is very, very wrong. Something is rotten, or there are a lot of money around. And, Jena, it's impossible to fight these billions. Imagine someone wanted to start legal action. How many years will it take? How much money will you have to spend? How are you going to fight these multi-million or even billion-dollar companies? For someone like me, I'm so much funded by the industry that I don't even own a house. I live in a house on a rent. I was telling friends that, guys, I would sell my house to fight them legally, but I don't have a house. I'm on a rent. I cannot sell a house that is on a rent. So then they know that they have the power, and it's extremely difficult to fight them legally. So what they are doing is, a kind of extortion, basically. That's what they do. And they don't even give you the opportunity to respond. When you respond, you are responsible for the response. They were telling me that, the BMJ is liable for anything it publishes. Well, I said, you are liable for what the journalists wrote, for hiding their conflicts. You actively participate in hiding their conflicts. So I need to, I want to find a journal to publish my response, in a medical journal. It has more than 30 references. It's far more scientific than what the journalist wrote. And I'll try to do that. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you something really quick, Con. Does funding necessarily compromise research? And I say that because I know a lot of research has been done with pharma money and nobody has a problem with it.
Well, to be honest, you know what? We tried to find money through pharma. We contacted Pfizer. I'll be honest. And we wanted to do a study on varenicline. It's the study that was basically reported a few days ago, as I told you, by another US pharma company, which was a nasal spray of varenicline. We contacted them. We never, got any funding, but we tried to find money for sponsoring by a pharma company, and they are accusing us of being funded by tobacco or cigarette companies. We never got any money basically for any of our research. All our research has been done with no money. And, no one cares from the tobacco or the cigarette industry about our study, because our study is about medical use of medical products. You can't, when someone is sick, you cannot recommend as a physician the use of recreational products. So by definition, we cannot use e-cigarettes, heated tobacco products, or even tobacco cigarettes, to treat or to prevent COVID. You understand that?
I understand that, but
in our patent, we couldn't have included non-pharmaceutical products. We have a patent right now. It's online. It's now public. It's a patent for all cholinergic agonists. It has nothing to do with tobacco harm reduction, because for medicinal use, you cannot use non-medicinal products. It's that simple, and they know it. They know it.
Yeah, I mean,
They're just
and that
used
kind
to it.
of, Con, that kind of ties into the whole Bloomberg thing, and I don't know whether it's been disproven or proven
Yes.
about the whole, getting the approval in the United States for that Hale thing, okay, and that's going to be a medical product, and that's why he's on this mission to, to discredit the consumer market because, he's got an interest in that. Now, in saying that, Jena, there's a situation in the Philippines. I know you're not really the consumer advocate, but you are involved in all of this. So I do have a question on the Philippines. What is the current legislative situation in the Philippines, and what lessons can consumers learn from what happened in Philippines with consumer advocacy?
There was a hearing with the FDA, and that's when we found out that the FDA received funding from the union, from charitable organizations funded by billionaires. What we can learn from it is that the way to handle it is we have to change the narrative. We have to change the narrative because it's time for smokers and vapers to say what is the best for them, because after all, they're the key issue here. If they decide to quit, fantastic. If they don't, they have choices. Unfortunately, these choices are being robbed by self-righteous non-smokers, by health organizations, and by charitable institutions funded by billionaires. So a shift in the narrative is necessary, and I think that's what we should do. Instead of,
No, there's a second part to that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. How did the expose of what went on with the union and Bloomberg and the FDA funding change the mindset of the legislators there in the Philippines?
I think it did, because the story came out in a series of news articles, and it really helps to put things into perspective, and it really helps public health policymakers to make decisions. So information is power, really. The more informed people are, the better choices they make.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense completely. Con, I know that scientific research is very cutthroat and very competitive, okay, getting funding. Is it possible that a lot of people are willing to put up with whatever conditions, even though we both know there should be no conditions, you have a hypothesis, you prove or disprove, but conditions of funding in order to have it look the way their funder wants it to look?
Well, if you look at the calls for research that will be funded, look at NIH, FDA, and so on. Most of the vast majority, if not all calls, are about risks coming from e-cigarettes. So what do you expect? Yeah. I mean, when they're talking about risks, when they're talking about hazards, when they're talking about problems, it's obvious that you need to submit a proposal that is looking at problems, is not looking at potential benefits. So, that's how they are able to basically, it may sound hard, but they're able to manipulate the research agenda. Because when they make a call for proposals that are going to be funded, they always look for the potential harms. They never look and they never care for benefits. And that's how you can easily, drive the research agenda wherever they want.
Yeah, but I seem to recall back in the old days when I was actually involved as a research administrator. Yeah, they'd make an application for a grant from, say, the American Heart Association or the American Lung Association, and yeah, they'd have we're looking for the risks of this. And in a couple of those cases, I can recall very clearly that what they were looking for, negative, they actually found a positive.
Well,
right?
That's an outlier. You know that. There's always exceptions that verify the rule, basically. So these are outliers. Of course, it can happen. But how many people you think are willing to do that? You know,
is it because of the funding issue? They just look for whatever they pick those risks because that's where they keep their their departments going. And
of course, it's a vicious cycle. You need to understand that.
Yeah, no. So nothing much has changed.
There's nothing objective there. There is nothing objective. Of course, there are people who are going to find and report something good, but when you are predisposed, that's confirmation bias. At its best.
Yeah.
It's a confirmation bias that makes you, subconsciously. I'm not saying that this is some kind of a conspiracy theory, but you subconsciously create a methodology that will always produce something bad. For example, we've seen repeatedly studies when they have overused e-cigarettes, they have basically caught fire from being abused. And of course, you're going to find formaldehyde. You may even faint if you would ever be able to inhale something like that. I tried it myself. I tried myself to vape at 400 degrees Celsius. And after 3 puffs that I never inhaled in my lung, I kept it in my mouth. I felt dizzy for half an hour without, inhaling them. I was just keeping them in my mouth. People who have never touched any cigarette cannot understand what's happening.
Well, if people don't want to understand, none of the science that they're going to do is going to actually be of any veracity because they're not. The methodology is going to be wrong. Correct?
Of course.
So, let's just what consumers. Jena, you said consumers need to, like Konstantinos said, they see something, they need to respond to it. Asa had an issue. He was attacked. He had help. He responded to it. They found it. This is going to be a constant thing, I think, that we're going to be dealing with for the next year or two. So a lot of consumers, this is a good question. A lot of consumers feel like they don't have the skills or the toolkit to be able to make those responses. What do you say to those people?
I would say that it's best to talk to people who are in our advocacy. You can't fight it alone. In shifting the narrative, it's very important that people get together, advocates get together, and they also should be able to have access to THR experts for verification of inaccurate information. And there's a lot of organization that can help them. Needless to say, I just want to point out that changing or shifting the narrative is very, very important. So instead of smokers, vapors, and nicotine consumers being demonized, the better story is who is preventing the smokers from changing. Another story is who's preventing the tobacco industry from trying to become better and who wants to block less harmful alternatives. So in changing the narrative, we're actually transferring the blame to those who oppose innovation. And I think that's a much, much better story.
And another thing too that follows on from that is that people need to be able to speak up because it was like Clive said this, we are the evidence. Those of us who switched off from one thing to the safer thing, we are the evidence. And like Jerry had said, attacking a private citizen it's ethically incorrect and defamation, so on and so forth. But I think a lot of advocates need to understand they don't need to understand the science and they don't need to be technical. They just need to humanize it. I'm a human being. This is what I've done. Okay. This is my choice. I have a right to make this choice. I am the evidence. I think that's one of the big things that's missing in a lot of the people that are, I want this or I want that. Like Jerry said, it's all great to sit there and have a moan on social media, but you actually have to do it in real life. And approach these politicians and approach these, officials and say, listen, make them listen to you. But it's very, very hard. And, by seeing what Konstantinos has gone through and seeing what Ace is going through, some are going to say, well, why bother? But I think Konstantinos pretty much is nailed it. You have to go after it like you did, Jena. You have to fight them. You cannot let them win.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with you, Nancy. Unfortunately, the narrative is being controlled by self-righteous non-smokers. That's really sad because what they don't put into consideration is the main issue, the smokers themselves. So that's quite sad because they don't know what it's like.
No, they don't know what it's like. Konstantinos, as a medical doctor, okay, and as somebody who vapes, it used to smoke, I presume, because every Greek I've ever known smoked, in my family anyway. How do other medical doctors approach you knowing that you now vape instead of smoking? I mean, do medical doctors still look down on it in their personal lives and look down on you because you do this now?
We don't have this, undemocratic fascist-like behaviors here in Greece. Yes, of course, I was a smoker. Of course, that was a bad thing. We never suggest that we are role models through our behavior because we were smoking. We are not even role models because we are vaping. But this, bad choice of smoking and then the transition to vaping gave me was, experience about tobacco harm reduction that you would never get unless you are a user or you are in need of tobacco harm reduction. So this is a precious knowledge and experience. So I never have any issues. Of course, there are smokers who are completely uninformed. And, smokers, people smoking were telling you that this is a bad thing for you, that the e-cigarette is bad for you. At the same time, they are smoking a cigarette. It's crazy, but, as crazy as it sounds, it's perfectly true. That's the level of misinformation that these people have managed to create in society, and this is harm done to smokers because it's the misinformation that dictates current and future behavior. And when these people are discouraged from using tobacco harm reduction products, of course, it's a public health disaster. It's bad for their own health. And, organizations like the WHO, the CDC, the US CDC, the European scientific associations, it's their own, achievement, let's call it in quotes. That's their achievement. They have managed to actively discourage smokers from using tobacco harm reduction products. And the end result for the vast majority of them is that they keep smoking. They continue to smoke. So it's harm, it's harm for people.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of goes against the Hippocratic Oath, I would imagine. But I guess some people, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. There are doctors here in New Zealand still that believe that nicotine is carcinogenic. And there are doctors here, I mean, one of our friends just went through it. He got bronchitis, and the doctor said it's because you vape. It's like willing ignorance, and that's concerning. It's very, very concerning.
Well, the same misconceptions about nicotine exist everywhere. We published a study, I think it was 2016, of Greek healthcare professionals. They had the same misconceptions about nicotine. 60%, 70% of them said that nicotine has a very important or extremely important role in smoking-related cancer and cardiovascular disease, something like that. The proportion of them believing that nicotine plays a major role in smoking-related disease is tremendous. And it's not just the society, it's also healthcare professionals. So you understand the level and the extent of misconceptions and misbeliefs, disbelief on THR.
Okay, I've got the last question that I have for all of us is this. How should governments assess scientific research? Clearly, they are not following sensible procedures at the moment. I guess this relates to the WHO. When they say something, everybody takes it as gospel. So how should governments assess the scientific research that they receive?
By doing exactly the opposite of what the WHO does. Open debate with all, open debate with all voices, I would even say including the industry, but it doesn't even matter if the industry is included, because there are a lot of voices which have been, which have remained on the sidelines, voices that are not, linked to the industry in any way. They just don't do it. It's an amazing job at cherry picking, at using whatever fits your own agenda. The confirmation bias is unbelievable. And you see the confirmation bias there. You just look at the kind of studies that they pretend to ignore. They don't ignore them. They know them perfectly well. They pretend to ignore them. They never use them in their documents. They know that they are there. They cannot, dispute that they are there.
Okay, bonus question. Sorry, I know I said it was the last one. Here we go.
It's like a panel of myself only, so please ask the others too. I don't want to be, overwhelming.
All right, this one's kind of a scientific one. Sorry, Con, you're the popular guy tonight. How much damage in terms of lost years of lives has the anti-vape rhetoric and influence cost us since e-cigs were introduced? I'm guessing that means how many people, how many years of people's lives?
The question is perfectly fine.
Okay.
Years of life lost, life years lost is a well-established marker of public health damage that we use in all public health issues. For example, with COVID, the years of life lost from extreme measures such as lockdowns, from shutting down schools, is going to be much higher than the years of life lost. Is going to be much higher due to the measures than due to COVID. There are studies already, for example, that school closures in the US will cost, over time, of course, more lives of years lost from the society than the number of deaths that were averted because of the school closures, even in the worst case scenario. Nancy, this is something that New Zealand and Australia is going to pay a very heavy toll. And imagine, and that's another issue, that COVID will never disappear. It's going to be endemic. So the countries that invested in the disappearance of the virus, I think that they're going to have problems in the future. They will have to remain isolated from the rest of the world, and that's a problem. But going back to tobacco harm reduction, I cannot give an accurate number, but lives of years of life lost means, for people who don't know, you look at how many people die prematurely and why, and then you can find how many, based on how many years you would expect them to live, you can calculate number of years that are lost in society from different issues, from suicide, from cardiovascular disease, from smoking, and of course you can calculate the years of life lost when you prevent a smoker from quitting, by using a less harmful alternative. So this person is going to die prematurely. They're going to lose years from their lives that they would have gained had they switched to vaping. And you can do modeling and you can find out over time how many years of life are going to be lost. This is, I'm sure we're talking about millions. It's definitely millions. But sorry, it's going to be different in different countries. It's not going to be the same for everyone. So you usually calculate them on a country level or on a regional level, for example, Europe, Asia, or whatever. But it's definitely going to be millions.
Okay.
Because smoking, we know that it reduces life expectancy by quite a lot. So imagine how many smokers a country has, and over time you would expect many, if not most of them, to switch to tobacco harm reduction. So increase their life expectancy. This is going to be lost because of Bloomberg, WHO, and things like that. So they are responsible for the society losing years of life. That's definitely the case.
Okay, fair enough. So they've got blood on their hands, is what you're saying.
No, that's exactly what's happening. You know, it's a public health disaster. These are public health enemies. That's exactly the way that they're doing things. And of course, it ends up in years of life lost, in people dying prematurely. There is no doubt about that.
Okay, thanks for that, Con. Any final thoughts, Asa, that you'd like to present?
Yeah, of course. Just to kind of like total up of what others, all of us had been said all along. A lot of things that Jena had said really made sense, and I think that what we as a consumer should do, because of course we are fighting an uphill battle, that's for sure, and it's not gonna end easily, and as doctor said, it's gonna escalate. It's not gonna subside or anything so that quick, especially in this part of the world. So yes, it's an uphill battle, and what we have to fight is we have to fight millionaires, billionaires, the so-called philanthropists. That's also going to be difficult. But what we can do is, some of you have mentioned, some of us had mentioned before earlier today, is that well, I think we should stick together. Maybe was it Nancy? You said that why bother, right? I mean, if everyone thinks like, hey, why bother? It's going to be too difficult. Then nothing's going to happen. Of course, I have thought many times that they say, yeah, why bother? But then again, I look at myself. Look at the health I gained back from quitting smoking and turn to vaping instead, and look at my friends and especially my sons, and looking at them, and they quit smoking by turning into vaping instead, and totally, really finally some of them already quit vaping even, without tobacco harm reduction. That would not be possible. They have tried.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I
mean,
think, that we should look, yeah.
I mean, people get, the people that say, why bother? I get very frustrated with them because, those of us that are out there doing this, we're doing it we're not doing this for ourselves. I don't think they realize that. Mirza, any final thoughts from you, darling? Because I know you have to go soon.
No. I don't have anything.
We've just completely blown his brain out. Poor Mirza.
I mean, I've not reached that point yet. So it's just, I have nothing.
Okay, no, that's fine. Jena, do you have anything that you'd like to add? Unmute.
One last thing that I'd like to say is that I think opinions change, and I think the critics of THR will eventually change. You know why? Because science is on the side of THR, and they won't be able to do anything to stop it.
Fair enough. Konstantinos, last but not least.
We need to be patient. We need to be consistent with our principles, with ethics, of course, and we should not succumb to the extortion. That's my message.
Fair enough. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you everybody out there, wherever you are. Any comments or questions, just leave it, I guess, on whatever you're watching, and we'll answer them. Thank you, Konstantinos. Thank you, Jena. Thank you, Mirza. Thank you, Asa. Good night. Good day. Bye, everyone.
Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye.